when did you first become knowledgeable of this?
Well, Jim, I first became knowledgeable in August of this year. We were talking earlier about Vale and Breckenridge. I have a lodge or a little cabin up there, and my friend, the uncle of JP, uh, has a weekly timeshare, a yearly timeshare up there. And I said, well, why don't you and Mary come over? It's COVID area. We can social distance on my deck. We had a glass of wine. Second glass of wine, he says, Rod, I got something to tell you. And he told me the story of his nephew, JP, having this computer shop in Delaware. And a man he thought was Hunter Biden came in, dropped off 3 laptops. And that's probably enough for starters. I'll go from there, whatever questions you want to ask me. But your interview with David Greenfield, I mean, he pretty well has the facts down straight as I know him.
Yeah, a couple cleanup items to kind of go through that and then get back to your involvement. It looks like, well, this was according to JP's interview that I was just watching with these 3 reporters. So there were 3 laptops apparently that were brought in, all with some form of liquid damage, but JP only accepted one of them. One of them, he said, was beyond repair. He didn't even bother to take it in. The other simply needed a new keyboard. And I'm not sure how that was handled, but I don't think he kept that one. And then he only kept the 3rd laptop. Is that your understanding?
I never got down to the numbers of laptops, Jim. What I know now is just based what I've read and the interviews I've watched. So when I was told the story, there was only one laptop, one hard drive.
And I read your original post, which I think what got our attention, where you posted an extensive piece on Facebook about it, and it seemed to me that you were kind of alluding to thinking that Hunter may have intentionally dropped these laptops off with the intention of never picking them up. Is that a theory that you have?
I've read that in an article, but I personally didn't have that sense of, hey, I'm just dropping these off here. I mean, if I wanted to destroy laptops, or the article I've read kind of inferred that he was hoping to ensure that they were beyond recovery. I don't know. That would be speculation.
Yeah, that seemed like a little bit of a strained theory to me, that he had intentionally tried to destroy these laptops by creating water damage and then drop them off at a computer store that would essentially confirm that.
Yeah, to me, that seemed a little bit of a stretch as well. That was not anything I was told, Jim.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and by the way, what I think would defeat that, if 2 of the 3 were returned to him, then the idea that his whole plan was just to drop them off and leave them there doesn't sound correct. It is obviously odd that he had in his possession 3 laptops, which means that certainly he has more than 3. If he's dropping off those 3, I'm sure he's got at least another one that he's working on, and that he would have all of them with him in Delaware, considering that it's my understanding that Hunter Biden lives in Los Angeles.
That's what I've read as well. But again, that was not part of any of the story. The story was fairly short and simple. Dropped them off, tried to give them to the FBI, and we can go into more detail there, because what I was told 2 months ago has been corroborated in stories I've read since then. The dad tried to get involved in Albuquerque, I want to say September-ish, after the 90-day period plus, with many attempts to try to give those laptops back. The FBI brushed them off, and I think the dad got involved again, from what I was told, but said, hey, I'm a retired Air Force colonel. This isn't just some fly-by-night people that you're dealing with. We're serious about this, and we're concerned.
Yeah, by the way, one thing I learned in a little bit of research is that apparently there's a 1-year law in Delaware. So if you've got no contract and you leave something for over a year, then the repair shop now owns it and has no responsibility to return it. But apparently Hunter signed an agreement when he brought these in where it was a 90-day. So he had his own contract that says 90 days, whereas the state is 1 year, and presumably the contract was spiced. A lot of people have questioned, okay, that applies to the hardware. Does that apply to copywritten materials such as videos that he took? Does the possession of those also transfer? So that's an interesting legal question that may or may not come up later.
Yeah, I would say it would be interesting. The more interesting legal question to me is I was sent some emails in August, not any of the ones like we've seen come out now, which, at least the way I read them, seem to definitely confirm that Hunter Biden set up a meeting with his dad with number two in Burisma.
So getting back to your story, so you're saying as early as August of this year, August
right.
of this year, you had seen what is perhaps the most important email that the rest of us have seen so far, which is the email from the Burisma representative confirming that there had been a meeting with Joe Biden.
I did not see that email, Jim. What my point was, I saw a couple of emails that seemed to indicate that Hunter was, well, and we already knew this, that Hunter was working with Burisma. And I looked at it, and I go, that's pretty innocuous. I wonder what else is on the hard drive. And that's about as far as it went. Beyond my friend, the uncle's story to me is, Rod, I tried to get, I mean, the family, from what Ron told me and from what I read, you know, they're just super patriots. I mean, they could have probably sold this for a lot of money, didn't. They tried to take it to the FBI a number of times. And then Ron tells me, and when we watch an impeachment trial go by and there are exculpatory emails on that hard drive and none of those are brought into evidence, that's when they said, okay, something's wrong, something's rotten in Denmark. We've got to try to get the word out. So again, I don't know how closely you read my Facebook post, but you'll see that he sent either an email, and the way he summarized the email to me, I've never seen it, but the way he summarized the email to me is, I sent it to Brett Baer, Sarah Carter, John Solomon, Cheryl Atkinson, maybe some others. And it was, I have access to some salacious emails that you would be interested in from Hunter Biden's laptop.
And sorry, who sent that email and when was that sent?
That was sent, I know a number of them were sent in March. And I know there were a number of follow-ups because, again, if you look at my Facebook post, Cheryl Atkinson and I go back and forth, and Ron jumps in there as well because she was taking some heat and some hate, I guess, on Twitter. And I don't even do Twitter, so it wasn't me that posted it out there. But I know Cheryl Atkinson, and I know her. Yeah, I spent a better part of a day with her.
Who is Cheryl Atkinson?
So Cheryl Atkinson was a former CBS reporter. She's a personal hero of mine because I flew her, a number of other media, Jim. I can't begin to tell you how many media were on this flight, but Hillary Clinton, Chelsea Clinton on Chelsea spring break, Sinbad, Sheryl Crow, who are part of the USO tour. We flew them from Ramstein into Skopje, Macedonia, and then they were helicoptered into an army post in Bosnia. Hillary made a claim that you may remember from the last election that, you know, trying to, I guess, have, who's that NBC News reporter? That
Brian Williams?
Yeah, trying to have a Brian Williams moment that we were fired on landing, and the receiving line that I was supposed to go to was canceled. And I'm thinking, gee, I think she only went into Bosnia once, and I was on that flight, and I don't remember being fired on. And I think I escorted her over to that receiving line. So Cheryl Atkinson broke the story on CBS and told the truth. And so then she left CBS shortly thereafter.
Were you one of the ones that came out and debunked the story at the time?
Well, let's see. When it came out the first time, I believe I was still in uniform. And once Cheryl Atkinson debunked it on CBS, I said, geez, I certainly debunked it with a number of friends and people that I was speaking with. But I didn't go public with it.
Okay, so back to your communicating with Cheryl Atkinson about the story. Now, by the way, you mentioned March.
Right, March of this year.
Okay, but
So
who was
Ron
involved?
was telling me, I'm sorry.
Sorry, that wasn't you involved in March then.
No, it was Ron, because I didn't know anything about this until August.
Okay,
So
it was Ron, and Ron is the uncle.
uncle, correct.
Okay, how long had Ron known about it from the beginning, essentially?
I want to say December. I don't think he ever told me a specific month, but I know he's been to Delaware and saw the laptop.
So in March of this year, they were trying to get the media's attention to cover this because the impeachment hearing was still going on.
No, the impeachment, I believe, was done by March, but I think they were concerned because none of this came up as evidence. So my question, I mean, this is the thing that I scratched my head on. Not that I'm a conspiracy theorist, but they also, about this time, from my knowledge of what I've been told and what I've read, is they got Rudy Giuliani and Rudy Giuliani's lawyer involved. So why in the world, if I don't know the exact timing of, did they give it to Rudy after the impeachment or before? I would hope that if they gave the president's lawyer that information before, that information would have been part of the impeachment trial. But it wasn't.
I have in my notes, but I'm not sure where I got it from, that they gave it to Giuliani in December.
Yeah, so that makes you wonder, doesn't it? Makes me wonder. And so when Ron was telling me the story of the media, he had tried to get it out, that he had sent letters to try to get the story out. I said to him, well, I was thinking in the back of my mind, well, I wish he had told me Cheryl Atkinson, because I know her. Maybe I could reach to her and tell her, reminder of the story of our flight into Macedonia. We say Bosnia, but it's actually right next to Macedonia together.
She's still with CBS?
No, she had to leave CBS from what I know, Jim, because when I read some of the other posts below mine and Cheryl's exchange, people are going back saying, Cheryl, you should have sent a private message instead of going public. But it was interesting, just as an aside, every time I'd pull up that Facebook post, Cheryl Atkinson's initial post to me was under the picture. And that's, Rod, you're posting salacious or false information. Interesting.
Yeah.
But anyway, one of the posts in that said, Cheryl's life was threatened when she left CBS, so I can understand her concern. And if you read the rest of the post, I mean, she's satisfied with both Ron's and my answer as to how we described it, because there's nothing untrue of what I wrote. I was told that my friend reached out to Cheryl. He didn't get any answers. That's all I knew.
So, and let's just be clear as to what the connection is between what's on the laptop and impeachment. Let me make sure I have this right. That basically one of the grounds for impeachment involved Trump asking the Ukrainian president to open an investigation and announce it into Joe Biden's and his son's involvement in Burisma, et cetera. Am I right so far?
That's certainly the way I took it, Jim.
Right. And yet here on the laptop, it appears that, well, Trump had good reason to be asking for such an investigation, because as it turns out, Biden, as vice president, was meeting with officials of this company that was being accused of a lot of bad dealings, broadly speaking, was under investigation for corruption in Ukraine. Who knows? I don't even know what all that involves, but whether it involves paying off politicians, et cetera. They were under investigation in Ukraine. And subsequently, Biden actually got the prosecutor fired, I guess, on that investigation.
Publicly, we told that story.
Yeah. He was proud that he got that. There's some speculation as to, well, why was he trying to get it? Obviously, you've got the self-interest of protecting Burisma because of his son being there, but you've got others saying that, well, actually, that investigator or that prosecutor was fired because he wasn't doing his job. That there was other countries that wanted him fired also because he was almost potentially part of the corruption. Am I right about that? At least what
So,
people are
so the
saying.
way I break it, so the way I break it down in my head, Jim, is we impeach the president of the United States for asking a question about corruption, and, and simultaneously with that, he held foreign military financing from the Ukrainians for a period of what, almost 3 months. I can tell you, as a former deputy commander at U.S. Southern Command, foreign military financing is held up all the time for different reasons. So now it appears like the former vice president, I say appears because I want the law enforcement agency, and oh, by the way, the fourth element of our democracy, to be doing their job, and that should be investigating this. Where's the curiosity? It appears like the former vice president of the United States did what worse than what the president was accused of. You know, he was actually appears. I don't want to say it's because nothing's been proven yet, but this laptop's been out there and in the FBI's hands since last December. Why the delay? Why isn't there? Why hasn't there been an investigation?
Yeah, well, I don't know enough about FBI investigations to know what a typical length of time would be on something like this. But what we've heard is that it appears that they're investigating money laundering. That I think it was the receipt that uh, JP received, or some coding on an FBI document indicated a coding for that this laptop is being taken for investigation into money laundering.
That's what I've heard as well. But again, when I read the emails, for example, and this is one again I did not have, but now that they've been out there, and I read the email from the vice president of Burisma to Hunter, I believe that was his position, that says thanks for setting a meeting up with your dad. At the very least, you know that his dad wasn't being truthful to the American people when he said, you know, I never had any contact or didn't know anything about my son's involvement.
Yeah, I mean, and that's huge, and I think that's one of the biggest pieces. I think for purposes of people evaluating Biden for the election, I did not have sex with that woman. I did not have had sexual relations with that woman. I mean, look how much heat Clinton got for looking into the camera and telling that bald-faced lie. But it was about sex, still, you don't lie to the American people, not that certainly not that directly, but at least Clinton's got the excuse, hey, it's none of your business to begin with, he could
Right.
argue. But here you've got Biden looking in the camera and directly lying about having any involvement with his son's involvement with Burisma. And now here's the proof that, in fact, he met with Burisma while he was vice president, while they were under investigation, while he was supposedly trying to get the prosecutor fired who was on the investigation.
And he was fired.
And he was fired. And even if you take everything else out of this, I think maybe you made this point in your Facebook posting, but Biden should have recused himself from having any involvement in this issue of this prosecutor, considering that his son was on the board of the entity the prosecutor was prosecuting.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. A Facebook post popped up yesterday from a year ago. And my post from a year ago was, whether or not former Vice President Biden was involved in Burisma is interesting. But it is interesting. But you would think at least we would be asking the questions, because the federal regulations tell us that you have to avoid even the appearance of special interest trying to influence something.
Well, I would just also think, generally speaking, as vice president of the United States, you would ask your son to cool it. I mean, the Burisma board thing is just one of the things this kid was up to internationally. I think one of the reasons the investigation is money laundering is apparently one of the things he was doing is advising people and helping them get their money out of various countries. That may have been the Moscow mayor wife story, where they're trying to get money out of various countries, and Hunter was helping them do that. But it's just kind of like, my God, I'm vice president of the United States. Keep an eye on your son and don't have him be doing this kind of stuff. I mean, maybe he can do it after you're vice president, but not while you're vice president.
One would think. Well, I kiddingly posted too a year ago. I wonder, when I was a commander over in Europe, I had the luxury of being able to fly myself around to the 11 bases that were under my command. And quite often my spouse would have to accompany me for an official function or whatever. But there's one weekend where our son was in high school. He could not, we didn't have a babysitter, probably could have left him alone. So I asked the legal officers, could I bring my son with me on the plane? Yes, I could, but I had to write a check to the US government. So I wonder if Hunter ever wrote a check to the US government for his flights aboard Air Force Two to either Ukraine or China. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, Trump had his opportunity at the debate to ask him these kind of questions, because it doesn't appear that Biden's going to be asked these kind of questions. But that's one that still Biden hasn't answered. What was Hunter Biden doing on Air Force Two, flying to China with you? What was his role in that? Why was he aboard? And what meetings took place? And which ones was he in? And which ones were you on? And, was he on U.S. government business, or was he on Hunter Biden business?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems too obvious. These questions are just too obvious, and Biden
is. Too bad we don't have the fourth state.
And it looks like, I mean, I guess perhaps thanks to COVID, Biden is able to avoid a lot of these questions because he's having these drive-in rallies, or simply, speeches given from, as they say, his basement. But, is he going to face reporter questions again between now and the election? Seems like he might get by without facing any.
It does. It does. So again, just going back to where we left off on my story, when my friend Ron, the uncle of JP, was telling me about the attempts he had made at the media, I thought, well, shoot, I had known Sheryl Crow. I wished you'd help me. I said, but if you're having trouble, my next door neighbor is a former Fox News reporter, and so subsequently, come July, Ron and my next door neighbor, Rod Burnson, former Fox News, former and retired LA police sergeant, came to know one another over our Zoom meetings, trying to strategize on how we get the Air Force Academy to realize that posting a Black Lives Matter video is offensive to many graduates. The initial letter that I wrote to the superintendent is, who used to work for me when I was a 3-star and he was a colonel, was, hey, Jay, you ask any Air Force Academy graduate and we'll stand arm in arm. No, we'll put our arms around our Black brethren and sisters and say, we stand against any form of racism. But you can't let it appear like we're endorsing Black Lives Matter. But anyway, Ron and Rod came to know one another that way. And then about maybe 2 or 3 weeks, well, I guess 2.5, 3 weeks ago now, Ron gave me a call, the uncle, and asked me, could I put him in contact with my next door neighbor, former Fox News reporter. So the questions I asked, I think any reasonable man would ask. The family has Rudy Giuliani involved. I've been told that Rudy Giuliani never did any personal research, but I've been told that Rudy Giuliani is the lawyer for the New York Post. Why do we need our help to break this story? The answer I was given from both Ron and Rod seemed to be fairly reasonable. They wanted another avenue other than just Rudy Giuliani breaking the story with Fox because of some of the dispersions that have been cast upon that relationship, I guess would be a positive way to say it. So my friend Rod, the former Fox News reporter, called his old mentor, a guy that used to be the executive vice president at Fox, I think for 20 years, and a guy by the name of Ken LaCourte. And if you go to his media site, you'll see how he wrote about getting this call from Rod Bernson, an old friend, former Fox News reporter, said, "Oh yeah, come on, Rod. 3 weeks before the election, Rod gave him the information to talk to JP personally. They convinced him. They sent him some emails. So I think the small role that I played was obviously just hooking up the uncle and my next door neighbor. And from there, he was able to talk to his old mentor, and his old mentor was used some of his old contacts that still remained at Fox to help write the story.
But the story was broken by the New York Post.
But you'll notice right after that, Fox was all over it.
Okay. So you're saying, because there's kind of a narrative out there that Fox passed on this story. Are you saying you don't think
Could
that's
have? Those details I don't know, and neither does Rod, because I've asked him. He gave it to his friend Ken LaCourte. What Ken LaCourte did behind the scenes, what he needed to convince. The last post I read, he said he would tell in another post how they got the story in the public square, but I haven't read that one yet.
So when did Fox first report on it? Was it the same day as New York Post?
Same day.
And do you happen to know, was their reporting saying New York Post says, or were they reporting it independent of New York Post?
Kind of both. I remember watching Special Report that night, and Brett Baer was saying, we haven't confirmed, but the New York Post, and he had a lot of questions. And I remember texting my friend, the uncle, saying, "Ron, you need to call up Brett Baer and tell him, give him the answers to all these questions."
Well,
he said, "I've been trying."
That's what I remember is very early on, Fox News was reporting that, and we have confirmed. So they had the confidence to report it. They weren't just reading the newspaper and reporting the newspaper, and that may have put Fox in a different categories than some of the other networks who, A, we know didn't want to cover it to begin with, but B, didn't necessarily have that confirmation.
Exactly.
And then the rest is history as far as the reporting on that. So one question that a lot of people are pondering is, it appears that JP, after the 90 days, basically said, okay, this is now mine. I know it's Hunter Biden's laptop. He's a very interesting fellow, considering who his father is, and certainly has been a lot of speculation about what he's been up to. Is that JP then decided to comb through his laptop? I don't think there's any other way to. I don't know if he's admitted to that, or it's even something to admit to, because arguably there's nothing wrong with that if he now owned it. But how else to explain him finding some of these emails among 10,000 emails?
Yeah, I saw you ask David Greenfield that question as well, and I guess that's a question we'd have to ask JP, and that one I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's told me.
And then there's speculation as to why he contacted the FBI. Do you know why he contacted the FBI? Was it about what in particular did he find on the laptop that caused him to think this is something I needed to contact the FBI about?
The only thing, I haven't been told anything on that, Jim. What I've read was that in September, the phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky, I believe, from Ukraine, was made public. And he knew that a lot of the details that he had on that laptop were applicable to that phone conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I kind of gleaned that from the JP interview that he did with the three reporters. He didn't want to answer a lot of their questions, but one thing he did mention was the impeachment, and just kind of threw it out there. And it led me to believe that, yes, that was a pretty serious motivating factor to him, that I'm sitting on information that I know totally contradicts the side that's attempting to impeach or supports Trump's case or what have you. It's relevant to the impeachment and therefore needs to be brought forward.
That is an accurate description of what I was told, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess just to add to that, I've seen in an effort to diminish the family's credibility that they're saying they're rabid Trump supporters, et cetera. I know Mac, JP's dad from the Air Force, and back in those days when we wore the uniform, the military was apolitical. So I can't really attest to anyone's political leanings, but what I can just say is, they're a great patriotic family. My friend Ron, who lives kind of in my neighborhood here, has by far, the highest flagpole in any of the neighborhoods around here. And he probably flies that American flag anytime when the winds are below 60 knots.
So what happened in the 2 months between the time that you learned about it in August and ultimately played a role in getting Fox News to cover it? What was going on in those 2 months approximately?
That I can't really attest to too much, Jim, but I can tell you that Ron and I were speaking several times a week on a Black Lives Matter video issue because we've been, putting together. There's probably, literally hundreds of emails that have gone to two different superintendents. Again, the football coach, the athletic director. We've had Zoom meetings with leadership at the academy. So I've interfaced with him a lot, and I don't ever remember asking him what's going on until he called me about 2.5 weeks ago and said, "Hey, could you put me in contact with your next door neighbor?"
So it seemed as if they wanted to get the story out there before the election.
You'd be asking me to speculate on someone's motivations, and that, to be honest, again, that's why I asked Ron and Rod so many questions. I kind of winced. This is just 3 weeks out, but I also know what you went through trying to get the media to bite on it back in March, and I believe May as well. So yeah, I'll make the call because I believe the information, despite the timing, is more important to be in the public's hands than to bury it.
So that kind of explains that timing. What do you think explains Giuliani's timing with the New York Post? Because he had it for many months prior to that. Do we think Giuliani was holding it back and to spring it at the most opportune time?
It's a great question. Great question.
And
I haven't talked to Rudy, so I can't answer what he.
You got to wonder how opportune it'll turn out to be, because we wasted the first week with everybody ignoring it and blocking it. Right. Now here we are with it finally, some details emerging, but we're only about 10 days out from the election now.
Yeah, exactly. And 50 million people or more have already voted. So
what do you make of, or what have you learned from Ron about other stuff that was on there, this kind of salacious stuff? One note I have is this 14-minute video that involves him with a crack pipe and some type of sex video.
The only thing I've heard that I can honestly attest to, Jim, was that there was some pornography. And in the three-way conversation with my next door neighbor, the former Fox News reporter and former LA police sergeant, he asked Ron point blank, "Do you have that in your possession? And is there any child pornographic material? Because if there is," he said, "given what we've seen, I'm not sure I trust the FBI. They may be coming after you." And Ron's response to that is, "I have not seen any child pornography."
So does that mean we don't think that there was child pornography on the computer?
I don't know. What Ron's answer to me indicated that he hadn't been through the whole hard drive like his nephew had been.
Mm-hmm. But
he said his nephew was visiting him a couple of weeks ago, and showed him a couple of pictures, but none of it was child pornography.
Uh-huh. So he was aware of pornography on there. It was not child pornography.
To the best of my knowledge, I've not seen, the only thing I've ever seen off the laptop basically is, I think, the two innocuous emails I was sent in August and what I've seen on the news.
Mm-hmm. And did you hear anything about this 14-minute crack smoking video?
I have not.
And what's the what are they up to now? Is Ron speaking to reporters about this at all? Is JP speaking to reporters? Is his father speaking to reporters?
Well, I addressed JP and Mac, the dad, earlier. Mac's emailed to me yesterday. I think made it pretty clear, to me anyway. I said, I feel as a fellow American citizen who wants to do his civic duty that I want to stand here with you on this. If you don't mind, I'll accept a few interviews. And his response was, JP's asking me not to because he's worried about me, and I need to take care of JP. So this morning I did speak with the uncle, and I said, Ron, you're much closer to this than I am. You should be doing these. And he said, no, I think you provide the right degree of, I guess we called it, I'm 1 degree of freedom away. I know the parties pretty well, but I'm not a family member, so I'm not in the position to be accused of maybe being overly biased because I am a family member. So I said, I get it. I'll do it. I'm proud to do it.
And we appreciate that. I thought that Joe Biden kind of stepped in it a bit in the debate when he just doubled down on this is Russian disinformation. I mean, speaking specifically about the laptop and the emails, he called it Russian disinformation.
Yeah, well, Jim, if you looked at my bio, you'll see one of the jobs I have as Assistant Director of Operations for the Air Force. Another job I had was the Deputy Commander of Southern Command. Another one I had was the 3rd Air Force Commander and Air Commander Europe as well. I've seen a lot of intelligence. I've seen a lot of intentional disinformation. Well, when I hear that spin, I just have to shake my head and say, personally, yeah, the Russians are good, but they're not that good. I mean, do you really think that they could pen a text from a father to his daughter the way that we've seen, come out in the media? I mean, do you really think the Russians are capable of that level of detail? Maybe, but it's much more logical for me to believe that, hey, a patriotic family here is doing their civic duty, and they turned over the laptops to the FBI.
Thank you again to Lieutenant General Rod Bishop. I do want to clarify something that came up. I had mentioned that it appeared that the laptop had made it to Giuliani in December. Lieutenant General Bishop confirmed for me after our interview that no, he did not get it until August or September of this year. So that helps explain why it did not get the information did get to the hands of the president or his lawyers, only to the FBI. And it didn't get to to Giuliani or his lawyers until August or September of this year. Wanted to clarify that. We're also going to be probably talking to the general more about his issue with this video, the Air Force video that the football team put together in support of Black Lives Matter. You can look that up on your own if you want to. Just Google Black Lives Matter and the Air Force Academy, and you'll see that very disturbing video. Thank you to our producer, Michael Parker. Thank you to our intern, Jake Wall. We'll be back soon with another episode of The Hidden Truth Show.
Thank you for listening to The Hidden Truth Show with Jim Breslow. You can find us at hiddentruthshow.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hidden Truth Show. Join us again next week for another episode of Hidden Truth Show with Jim Breslow.